Welcome to Ageless by Rescu. This podcast is devoted to exploring the science of rejuvenation, uncovering the most trusted experts, the must-have products, innovations, and technology in the field of vitality, aesthetics, new beauty, and cosmetic enhancement. I'm delighted to have you here with us, Fiona. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to connect with you. So lovely to see you.
We've had so many conversations about positive aging. I first met you actually when you were in skin therapy. You were a co-founder of a very big skincare brand, a formulator, a trainer for the Skin Institute brand. Is that right?
Yeah, so I've worked for a lot of different skincare companies and skincare brands. I think you name it, I've probably worked with it or used it or tried it or trained with it. So my background is skincare. I've been in the skincare industry for 30 years. That makes me feel, been around for a while. And also nutrition. So for me, my passion really is combining nutrition and skincare, because I really am all about the whole longevity and staying youthful and vibrant for as long as we possibly can, because I think, we've got one life, so let's make the most of it and let's live it to our fullest and our healthiest. So that's what I'm all about.
And the reason I've invited you to be a guest on the podcast for our audience is that I think that you're uniquely trained. A lot of nutritionists or dietitians or healthcare experts or wellbeing experts work in isolation, but you've come from a beauty background. So the conversation around wanting to have the best glowing skin of our life, wanting to have, minimize fine lines, wanting to feel like we were in our 20s, 30s is not foreign to you. And I want to talk about, first of all, your expert take on the role of nutrition and vitality and also aging.
Look, I think when it comes to nutrition, it's actually very simple. And I think somewhere along the way, it's got really complicated. And this whole wellness trend that came around was a lot of it, I feel, was based on a lot of scaremongering and what you can't eat and what you shouldn't do. And it became very confusing with a lot of different messages out there. But the reality is, when it comes to healthy eating and good nutrition, the foundations are very simple. But I think, Baha, what gets missed is that there are all these conflicting messages of, don't eat dairy, don't eat gluten, eat low carb. And a lot of these messages are incorrect. And a lot of people will eat to, they eat on what they think it's going to make them look like. So people eat sort of to lose weight or to try and keep weight down, and they get very obsessed with what they're eating. A lot of people don't actually eat for wellness, for vitality, for good health. And that's very different. So rather than starve yourself or take a supplement or follow these diet trends, it's really important to understand what healthy eating is. And I think a lot of people don't get the foundations right, and then will rely on a pill or a vitamin supplement. And it doesn't work that way. We've got to get the foundations right.
I'm going to take it back a notch, though. It's not sexy to eat for wellness. People want quick fixes. And, we've been sold a lot of diets on the premise that it's going to make us more beautiful. Like I remember, I don't know if you remember the Perricone diet, Dr. Perricone salmon diet. And, there was a time in the 90s or early 2000s that we all stunk of salmon because we were eating 5 servings of salmon. Sure, my health glowed, my skin glowed, I looked gorgeous, but it wasn't very, socially acceptable to just be on a salmon diet. And then, there's a massive uptake in plant-based eating, veganism. Again, the promise isn't just health, it's how it makes you look. Bulletproof coffee, intermittent fasting. The first sexy sizzle of all of these, eating protocols is how it will affect your look. So how do we marry the goal of being our best selves to achieving nutritional balance and a healthful long-term marriage of beauty and nutrition?
I think when you're healthy on the inside, when you're eating well, that's going to radiate in absolutely every aspect of your life. So your skin's going to change. You're going to get that actual healthy glow, that vitality. Your cells are functioning at their optimum, and that's going to give you more cellular energy, which you're going to have more stamina, more energy, more vitality. I mean, one of the key signs of aging or premature aging even is chronic inflammation, or what we call inflammaging. And some of the signs of chronic inflammation are the things such as low energy, fatigue, apathy, where you just can't be bothered to do anything and you can't get excited about life. And I hear it so many times from people when they say, I'm just tired, I'm exhausted, I can't be bothered. Like, that's not living your best life. And that's a warning bell to say, come on, what's going on? Is it because you're stressed? Is it because you're burnt out? Is it the diet? Are you drinking too much? What's going on? Let's strip it back and let's start with that foundation, because when we can get the foundations of lifestyle and diet right, that's going to have a knock-on effect to every other aspect of our life, and how well we work, how well we look after our families, and our love for life as well.
So, we've talked about before the markers of youth, sexual virility, energy, brain function, glowing good health, energy. What are some of the other things that you think that nutrition can correct on that path to revitalization and agelessness?
Well, nutrition's an interesting one. We need to get the vitamins and minerals, all sort of the macronutrients in for energy, of course. But what I don't think people realize is that food in general, what we put in our mouths, has got the ability to not only give us nutrients and not only give us fuel for energy, but it has the ability to affect the way that our genes express.
Wow.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that. So if you think about the gut and the gut microbiota and all the living organisms and microbes and viruses and fungi that live inside us, what we eat will either have a beneficial effect on the gut microbiota or not such a beneficial effect. And I think when we can grasp the concept of what we eat can actually affect our gene expression, then that is going to really set us up for longevity, health and wellness, or it's going to set us up for poor aging or disease. So I think it's important to understand that how we live our life, our lifestyle factors will also affect gene expression. So how stressed we are. Stress plays a huge role in health and well-being and longevity. And even exercise, we say that sitting is the new smoking, because we know that exercise, obviously we know that it's good for our metabolism, it's good for muscle strength, it's good for our bones, all things that we need to be aware of with aging. But exercise is also involved in keeping our gut microbiota healthy and our gene expression as well.
Can I ask you more? Can I ask you just to clarify this new term, gene expression? What does that mean? And let's talk about the nutrition or mind-body connection and gene expression. This is really interesting.
Well, when I say gene expression, it's not really a new term. It's more just how our bodies function, right? So we've all got genes, but they will express. So you may have a genetic tendency for a certain disease, but that gene may not express, or it may express, depending on stress, lifestyle, diet, really are the main things. So to a certain degree, we can control to a certain degree. There are genetics that do play a role, but how we live our life, what we put into our bodies, will affect the way that our genes express. Now, we've got genes that are going to have an effect on longevity. There are actually longevity genes, and certain people and people that live into 100 and beyond do seem to have particular genes that express, or but also it's important to understand that we do have an effect on our genes by how we live. So that really comes back to what I'm passionate about, which is the concept of nutrigenomics. And nutrigenomics really is the concept, and this was really something in studies that was really only being looked at in the last 20 years. So in the past, we've always looked at food as the nutrient component in food, and an individual component of the food, maybe it's a vitamin, say vitamin C or whatever, that has been studied to see what effect that has on our health and well-being. But only recently, in the past 20 years or so, have studies shown that it's not just about the individual nutrients in food, it's also about these important plant compounds in food that have an ability to actually affect the way our genes express, or have the ability to turn on or off certain genes. And that is what we call the concept of nutrigenomics. So we can either turn on positive genes or negative genes, and that's what I find really exciting.
You developed your own supplement range, Vitasol, which I tried, I think about 2 years ago. I tried your marine collagen as a skin booster. And I think it's really interesting that, as a nutritionist who really advocates that we've got a lot of power in what we put into our mouths and how we prepare food, you've also developed supplements. Do you believe that organic is essential, or are you flexible with regards to the origin of the foods that we eat and the preparation of the foods that we eat? And then I'll get you to take us through some of the supplementations you advocate.
I think that if you have the privilege of being able to eat organic and you can afford it, then by all means eat organic. And the fact that food is grown without chemicals and pesticides, although there are very limited studies on the effects of that, because there really hasn't been many studies done in that area. What we do know about eating organic food is that particularly with plants grown in an organic environment, they do tend to be higher in certain phytochemicals and things like polyphenols. So what we do know is that when you eat organic vegetables that are obviously grown without chemicals and pesticides, because those vegetables don't have the pesticides protecting them, if you like, then they have to produce their own antioxidants and things like polyphenols to protect themselves. So they tend to be slightly richer in nutrients.
And we ingest that.
Yes. So that's the benefit. But also we're not having these chemicals and pesticides, which we just don't really know yet what effect that has on the gut microbiota. So where possible, I think great, go for the organic food, particularly fruits and vegetables. But if you can't afford it, then eat the fruits and vegetables and just make sure you wash them well. So I don't think it's worth obsessing over, but doing the best that you can. And the most important thing, Baha, is to get those fruits and vegetables and to get those plant-based foods in, because we know that the plant-based diet, and that's a diet that's rich in plant foods, it's not a diet that's devoid of all animal-based produce, but the basis of that diet is plant-based. We know that that is going to lower our risk of disease. We know it's going to be an anti-inflammatory diet. And the diversity of plant foods in the diet has also been shown to be beneficial in the diversity of the gut microbiota. So we know that that is a really healthy way to go.
We were speaking before about how you advocate, like, and some quick tips and quick wins that we can have. And your mantra is simplicity. Can you take us through, say, you know, if I was to come to see you, or, you know, I know you used to have a clinical practice, how would you guide me to create a more anti-inflammatory, nutrient-rich, plant-based, enhanced diet that's going to help me feel and look ageless?
I think everybody is going to be different, obviously. So there's no one size fits all approach, because it does depend on lifestyle, age, activity, etc., etc. So we always have to take that into consideration, food intolerances, of course. But, you know, the basics are really making sure we try and reduce stress or get on top of stress levels, because that is going to have a knock-on effect to hormones, which can affect, you know, disease, premature aging. We know that exercise, daily exercise, can affect, as I mentioned earlier, the way that we age. That's important. Very, very basic guidelines is to increase the amount of plants in our diet. So I think the last study I looked at, 96% of Australians are not eating enough vegetables. So what's interesting is, I would say the majority of people that I say to, how is your diet? Do you have a healthy diet? Tell me about your diet. 99.9% would say, oh, my diet's pretty good, which is really interesting when we know that the stats, Australians just are not eating enough vegetables. So the amount of plant-based foods, we really need to increase that. You know, have plant foods at breakfast. So if you have toast, have avocado and tomato with it, maybe some herbs. Get those veggies in, veggies at lunchtime and at dinner. And when I'm talking about plant-based foods, we're talking about things like fruits, vegetables, getting in nuts and seeds, getting in the whole grains. So that would be things like oats, brown rice, bread, but the whole grain bread, the rye bread, you know, the buckwheat, rather than the really refined carbohydrates. Getting in legumes, and also thinking about herbs and spices, and how we can get more of these really important plant chemicals in the diet, not just the vitamins and the minerals. That's also going to give us these really important prebiotics, which are the fuel for the beneficial microbes in the gut, which we know can affect gene expression and are also important for producing substances that are going to have an effect on down-regulating the pro-inflammatory pathways in the body. So these things are really key to reducing inflammation in the body, which we know can have an effect on aging. So that is something that is very, very simple. And I have had people that have just tried to do that, getting at least 30 different plant-based foods in a week, and getting in as much.
That's a lot. I mean, that's quite a bit of diversity and variety.
Well, if you think that's including fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, so it's not actually that much. I mean, I could have, if you had berries and blueberries and raspberries on your breakfast, that's 2. If you had oats, that's 3. If you put some walnuts on the top, that's 4. Put a few pumpkin seeds on, that's 5. So you can really start to get the diversity up there quite easily, and that's 1 meal. So if you can keep mixing it up throughout the day, it's quite achievable, and it can actually be quite fun to do, getting in many different colors in as possible. And if you always have red tomatoes, have orange ones, have yellow ones, have green ones. Get the mixed legumes instead of just the plain chickpeas. Mix it up. The more diversity, the more different types of fibers, the different types of nutrients it's going to fuel for your gut, and that's going to have a knock-on effect to health and well-being. That's a really simple place to start.
And what's your take on proteins, animal proteins, meat, and, you know, fish We talked about the Perricone diet and all that stuff.
Well, the government guidelines are about 2 to 3 serves a week of oily fish, which is actually quite a lot. Like, I think you've got to really sort of make an effort to eat that. And that's going to give us enough of the omegas, the EPA and the DHA, which are also helping to keep inflammation at bay. And they're also going to be really beneficial for brain health, heart health. So trying to get at least 2 serves of fish in a week is going to be beneficial for vitality, for brain health, and for glowing, beautiful skin. So I'm all about the fish. We do need protein as well. It's about getting the right balance. When people have too high a protein and not enough carbs, that can be problematic. Not great for women in particular, particularly it can throw hormones out. So making sure we have enough good quality carbohydrate is important. So by all means have meat or animal produce, but we just don't want to be having a lot of it or highly processed meats, you know, a lot of bacon and salamis and those types of things. If you want them now and again, fine. But the most important thing is get the diversity of the plant foods in, because when we have that, it's going to negate any other food sort of negative effect, if that makes sense.
And what about the role of sugar? I mean, everywhere we've heard that, you know, it's hugely inflammatory. And at the very beginning of the podcast, you flagged inflammation and inflammaging as, you know, a key thing that you're wanting to educate people on. What's the role of sugar in aging, and what are some of the swaps or some of the tips and techniques that you can offer us in our anti-aging quest with sugar?
When we're talking about sugar, I think it's important to mention that there's sugar in the sugar, if that makes sense, because people, I think when that I quit sugar craze went around, there were actually cases of scurvy reoccurring in Sydney, which is a vitamin C deficiency. And this was because, and this was in children, because mothers were beginning to get freaked out about giving their children fruit because of the sugar and because of the fructose in fruit. So eating fruit, which does have natural sugars, even milk has natural sugars. Sugars naturally occur in nature, and we do need a certain amount of sugar. I mean, our brain runs off glucose, so we need sugar for cellular energy, but we need it from natural carbohydrates, and that's also going to come with all the nutrients as well from those whole foods, fruits and vegetables, etc. Now, when we're looking at added sugars, so refined sugars or processed foods that have got a lot of added sugars or corn syrups and things like that, they're the sugars that we want to avoid. And that's when we're having way too many sugars in the diet. What that will do is it's going to affect how we age, because when we age, there's a process that occurs called glycation, and that's when a sugar molecule basically binds to a protein or a nucleic acid in the body, and we get this glycation occurring when quite often it will be collagen, our protein fibers stiffen and harden, and that's what happens as we age. You know, the joints stiffen and we get stiffer and we get aging in the skin. So the more sugar we eat, the more excess, and I think it's important to say excess sugar. If we're having an excess of sugar and we're not having enough nutrients to balance that out or plant goodness, then we are going to see an acceleration in aging and an acceleration in what we call glycation. And whilst that's going to affect joints and mobility, we're also going to see that as lines and wrinkles in the skin as well. So too much sugar isn't a great thing.
And in terms of rosacea and some dermatitis, I've heard that sugar and inflammation can also trigger those skin conditions as well. Is that correct?
That gets really complicated because quite often with rosacea skin, for instance, there can be a gut component. And we know that sugar can affect the gut. And it's how they're having that sugar. So if they're having sugar with a lot of refined carbohydrates, they're not having the prebiotics, they're not having those plant nutrients, that's going to work very differently in the body than if they were having sugar with prebiotics. That's going to sort of compensate that. So with a rosacea skin, for instance, we need to rule out any underlying gut issues as well. But there's a lot of triggers for rosacea. Hot drinks, alcohol is a big
talk to me about alcohol and aging. I mean, we know, but let's live in the real world. If you want to continue consuming alcohol, what is a safe, rule of thumb that is not going to derail all of your facial treatments and skincare products and all the other things we spend money on?
I think the safe recommendation is two drinks a day. I think personally that's way too much. I think if you had 2 drinks a week, that would probably be a more safer way. And it depends how much alcohol you're having. So if you don't drink at all and then you just go on binge drinking, that's going to really have an effect on your gut, which is going to have an inflammatory effect in the body as well. If you're having a little bit of alcohol and you're also eating a really healthy diet, then that's all going to balance out. And, red wine, we know it's got a few polyphenols in there, so there's going to be some health benefit. Saying that though, for some people, if they live a really stressed out lifestyle and they find that just half a glass of wine a day is going to just help them get on top of it, there may be some benefit there. So I'm not about don't ever have alcohol. It's about having it in an environment that it's controlled, that we're not relying on it to get wasted and, lose all our worries. If you've got the basics on the basis of a really healthy diet, you get the 30 plant foods in a week, then a little bit of alcohol now and again is okay. If you had a glass of wine a night, if that's what you need, I do think there are healthier alternatives, but for some people it is a way of just actually helping them to relax a little bit. And I think it's about not relying on it as your prop, as long as you're not relying on alcohol to see you through.
When you go to a health retreat, and I love health retreats, and I, before the lockdown, I would go at least once a year. The first thing that they do is exactly as you advocated, up your plant intake. You're often only on a plant-based diet at a lot of health retreats, or your intake of proteins is really simplified and very clean. You're told to up your water intake. You're told to drop coffee and alcohol. Does coffee have a role in an anti-aging program?
I'm actually doing a health retreat in September for a longevity retreat for slow aging in the Hunter Valley at it used to be the Golden Door, now the Alicia. And they're big on no coffee, but I actually take coffee with me because I actually love coffee and I'm a big advocate of coffee. And
wow, okay.
What a lot of people don't realize is that coffee is a really good source of polyphenols, and polyphenols are great for the gut and they're great for aging. So again, it's balance and moderation. If you're relying on 7 to 8 cups of coffee a day, which I see a lot of people that drink coffee throughout the day, that is going to have an effect on the nervous system, and that is not healthy. But if you're someone that you have 1 to 2 good cups of coffee a day that aren't full of sugar and, artificial flavors and things like that, just a couple of coffees a day, that is absolutely fine, providing that you're not somebody that is strung out and high anxiety and it's got a very temperamental nervous system and can't cope with coffee. But if you can, 1 to 2 cups a day can actually have health benefits because of the polyphenols. So everyone responds differently to coffee, but I think it can actually be part of a balanced, healthy diet and can help with slowing the aging process.
Do you advocate bulletproof coffee? Have you ever tried it? Is that something that you have explored the science of? Because it's something that people are super curious about.
Still, I thought that one had gone. I don't advocate it at all. I don't believe in it. I think that for a couple of reasons. I don't advocate it because a lot of people will have the bulletproof coffee, which is usually having coconut oil and butter sometimes added to black coffee. So basically, instead of having a nutritious meal with like important plant fibers, etc., you're having saturated fat, basically. So you're not getting your nutrients. You may get some polyphenols from the coffee, but that's about it. So that's not great. So you are losing nutrients doing that. We also now know that saturated fat is pro-inflammatory in the body. We also know that saturated fat will enhance the growth of certain gut microbiota or gut microbes. And we know that a high fat diet, and that's usually with the bulletproof coffee, it's low carb and high fat. But a high fat, particularly saturated fat, not only alters the gut microbes in a potentially negative way, it depends what else you have with it, and that's the key factor here. But fat in general and saturated fat will enhance the absorption of what we call lipopolysaccharides or endotoxins from certain gut microbes. Now, what that means is we're absorbing endotoxins, and it's because it's lipid soluble, which then become pro-inflammatory. So we know that a high fat diet is pro-inflammatory. So this whole low carb, high fat diet, I have never been a fan of. There is a time and a place for it, particularly with, I think it's epilepsy, but not for health and well-being for most people. We also know, particularly with women, if they're on a low carb diet, that can actually raise cortisol levels, which can affect things like adrenal fatigue, adrenal burnout, that feeling of exhaustion. A low carb diet can affect the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland in a negative way. If it's a long-term low carb diet, that can affect our reproductive hormones. And a low carb diet can also have a negative effect on the thyroid. And so it can start to take the thyroid into a hypothyroid state. And again, that's not what you want if you're trying to lose weight and you want to feel vibrant and full of energy. You're going to feel sluggish and tired. So quite often these things that we're doing to, that's the wellness trend, or we're doing it to look a certain way, can have the opposite effect of what we're trying to achieve. So I'm all about going with the evidence-based information and really look at where this information is coming from, and look at the people that follow these diets for a long period of time. Most people don't, because they sort of wear out somewhere along the line, or they're not thriving on them. The diets where people do thrive, and actually people have the lowest risk of disease, they're the healthiest and they live the longest, are these anti-inflammatory style diets, the diets that are plant-based. They do have a little bit of dairy, they have a bit of meat-based products, they have their coffee, they have a little bit of alcohol, you know, the Mediterranean style diet, but they're eating a lot of fresh produce, they're having a lot of plant-based foods there as well.
What about intermittent fasting, Fiona? Do you, where does that fit in? Because again, a lot of studies have shown that, you know, reducing our calorie intake, and in fact, tipping the body into a fasting process, can have anti-aging benefits. There's been science on animals, there's been tests on humans. Dr. David Sinclair, who, you know, is a major advocate for this kind of eating, is an anti-aging expert. What is your experience and your thoughts on intermittent fasting?
Used in the right way, I think, and there's definitely evidence there to support it, but I think sometimes we then start to obsess, and it then becomes an obsessive type of diet rather than used for a beneficial response. So for instance, we know that obesity, if somebody eats too much or just a general intake of excessive calories, accelerates the aging process, causes inflammation. So that will.
But so does excessive dieting, right?
Yeah, yes, it does. And this is why we've got to get the balance right. So an enlarged fat cell in itself will produce inflammatory mediators and set this whole inflammatory cascade up. So that's not great. Controlled dieting, chronic dieting can affect the gut microbiota. We can become nutrient deficient, and that can also accelerate the aging process. So that's not great either. When it comes to intermittent fasting, just looking at it from a logical point of view, our bodies, I think, are highly sophisticated, and when the body needs to protect itself, it will naturally encourage you to go without food. So to give you an example, let's say you've been overindulging and it was Christmas or something like that, and you have a day or a weekend where it was very indulgent. Most people go, I've had too much, I've got to get back on track, and we'll go for a couple of days of very light eating. That's, in a way, intermittent fasting. In a way, you're reducing your calorie intake. We also know that the cells of the body will go through what we call autophagy when we have reduced calorie intake. So after a period of fasting of about 16 hours, the cells go into this process of autophagy. It stimulates a biochemical reaction in the body called NRF2 activation, which stimulates the cell to basically clear itself up. So if there's any toxins, cellular debris, the cells will be able to go in, clear themselves up before we get DNA damage. And that's really the process of, or that's what intermittent fasting is actually doing. So this is all, our cells will actually protect themselves. We know that the cells, to activate cellular defense mechanisms, our cells can produce their own antioxidants to protect themselves, which are thousands of times stronger than a synthetic vitamin C, for instance. We need the right nutrients to do that, and these important plant compounds. Our cells can also activate or down-regulate pro-inflammatory pathways when they get the right signaling. And we can do that via, again, these plant compounds. We can also, our cells will also clear up cellular debris or detoxify themselves, if you like, when they get the right signals. So plant-based diet will do that, exercise will do that, and calorie restriction will do that. So intermittent fasting will do that.
So it's about giving your body time to do what it would naturally do, especially if it's also being supported by good nutrition, good lifestyle. The intermittent fasting gives your body that, I guess, clear pathway to do what it needs to do. Is that correct?
Sort of, yeah. So we where it doesn't work as well is if you're like 5 more minutes, and then I can eat, then you eat whatever you want, go on a big binge, and then I'm not eating again. There may be some benefit to that, but it's more, I think you naturally fast anyway. If you have dinner at 6 and then you don't have anything to eat till 10 o'clock the next day, you're sort of naturally intermittent fasting anyway. So as long as you're not eating late at night at 9 o'clock and then you're having breakfast at 6, we can naturally fast without making it into a special diet. I guess that's my point.
I love that with all of your clinical experience, with all of your, experience on the other end of aging, which is cosmetic and skincare creation, you then went into the study and the production of your own supplement brand, Vitasol. And from memory, you've got a collagen supplement, a gut health supplement, an antioxidant, and something for flexibility. Can you just talk us through how each of those supplementations work in with a healthy lifestyle and, a pro-aging kick that we can give our lives?
I'm all about nutrition first. So getting the nutrients naturally via diet first. And the studies, study after study after study, always say the best way to get nutrition is via a whole food diet. Now, as I already mentioned, most people aren't eating enough plant-based foods in the diet. And when we get our nutrients via a synthetic pill, these are high-dose, mega-dose nutrients in an isolated form that often come with fillers and excipients, things like propylene glycol and emulsifiers, and things that I don't believe we should really be putting in unless we absolutely have to for, you know, it's a medicine or something like that. So if we, what I wanted to do is bring out something that is going to support a healthy diet, that's got those important plant compounds in that we simply do not get in a synthetic vitamin, that is also going to be giving you those important different prebiotics to support and nurture the gut microbiome, that is also going to have natural vitamins and minerals that are all sourced naturally via plant-based and whole foods, without relying on synthetic nutrients, because synthetic nutrients work very, very differently. I always say there's a time and a place for mega dosing nutrients. There is a time and a place for it, but not for every single body every day, because it will have a side effect. So I wanted to bring out something that was pure, that was natural, that was going to support healthy aging, that was going to support that detoxification of the cell, if you like, giving the cell the nutrients it needs, that was going to support a healthy gut, that was going to do all the things that we've been talking about without artificially manipulating the cell, and trying to educate people away from just popping pills and synthetic vitamins. So these are all whole foods, the purest ingredients available from all around the globe. I'm absolutely pedantic about quality. And Baha, you know, there are so many products out there that will use the cheapest ingredients, which will compromise the quality of the ingredient and the efficacy of the product. Many powders will have things like maltodextrin and fillers and bulking agents, so you think you're getting more value for money. I
want to ask you
different things.
I want to ask you a quick question, because, you know, how on earth would we know? Is there a way? Is there a way of knowing if a supplement that you're taking is working? You know, a lot of us are taking multiple things at once. Is it blind faith? And how do we know?
You don't really know, because marketing is so clever, and people will pull all different, you know, marketing strategies at you, and fancy words, and will, you know, I heard someone say the other day, oh, you're better to have liquid collagen because it absorbs better. Well, a collagen powder is mixed into a liquid, so you're going to absorb it the same way as a pre-blended liquid. You know, there's just all sorts of weird things that get said. And the average person wouldn't know, and you can't really tell by looking at a label, because you don't know where those ingredients come from. Most people won't know what an emulsifier is. They don't know how it affects the gut. They don't know what maltodextrin is, so they won't know. So it does come down to a bit of blind faith, trusting the integrity of the company that you're buying from. I mean, there's a lot of collagen products out there that they use farm fish. Most collagen, marine collagen, comes from fish farms in Thailand. They use things like tilapia fish, which is a fish that it's really used to be an aquarium fish that isn't something personally I would want to be eating. They're banned here actually in Australia. For me, it's all about quality. So we use wild caught deep sea cod from it's all wild caught sustainable. For me, it's about the quality, but unfortunately the skincare, the beauty industry, the nutrition industry, most people in it, not all of them, but most people in it are there to make a quick buck. And for me, my passion is transparency and integrity, and really being a bit of a whistleblower really to what goes on in the industry. If you want to know if your supplement is working, then how do you feel when you take it? I mean, the feedback we get from Vitasol is people say when they stop taking it, they don't feel great. they notice, more vitality, more energy, their gut health, less bloating, more bowel regularity, glowing skin, clearer skin, healthier nails. So it's a lot of it is it takes time to see the results.
That's what I was going to ask you. How long should we give any supplementation before we see it, working and producing the results that are promised?
It varies with everyone, because if it's a gut thing, you may notice it more quickly than a skin improvement. But with collagen, for instance, you really need to give it, and the clinical studies have shown about 6 to 8 weeks. I say give things a good 3 months, because you've got to wait for skin cells to renew and for hair to grow and for nails to grow. So it is going to take time. If you're taking a supplement and looking at your nails and then 2 days later is saying, well, my nails aren't any different, well, no wonder, because we're actually giving you the nutrients for the body to sort of grow new cells. So it will take time. And even with things like fish oil supplements and essential fatty acid supplements, that takes a while for that to build up in the system. So anything between 3 to 6 months, really. So the change.
And no one wants to hear that. Everyone wants a quick fix.
I know.
Everyone wants to, to shortcut their way through. Everyone wants to tell their friend, I've got the best collagen supplement. You should take what I'm taking.
Absolutely. But the studies do say with collagen 6 to 8 weeks. I know when we launched ours, people after 2 weeks are saying, I can see the difference. But it really does depend. With collagen, for instance, it depends on your age. It depends on your activity levels. So where these companies say, well, ours is better because you need a smaller amount, that's not necessarily true, because if you're more mature or you've got a higher activity level, you will need more collagen. So I actually say double the dose for the first month if you're above 40, and then go to the maintenance dose.
Wow.
For, ongoing. So you've got to understand how these ingredients work in the body. Sometimes the smallest amount may not be enough for some people. So the dose may vary slightly for different people.
Well, they don't call you the forensic nutritionist for nothing. I'm going to wrap up, and just if we were, we've heard about your amazing and really simple advice to up your plant intake to 30 plant source foods a week, to introduce diversity. If we were to take a couple of supplements, or maximum 3 supplements, to help with, our vitality, our glow, our energy levels, what would you recommend?
If you want sort of vitality and energy, then I would put you on the Vitasol Infinity, which is polyphenols, antioxidants. That's incredible for brain health, for energy, for glowing skin. Everyone can take the marine collagen, and that actually in clinical studies has been shown to help to mimic the growth factors that stimulate the fibroblast cell that produce collagen, elastin, and hyaluronic acid. So you want that glowy, radiant, dewy skin. That is going to be a winner for everybody. The more you need collagen, the more you'll notice the difference from it, if that makes sense. So if you're 20 and you take it, you won't notice such a difference. You're more maintaining. But those 2 things are going to be great. It really depends on the individual. If you're not having any fish, then that is when you would need to be looking at taking a fish oil supplement. So if you don't eat fish, you're probably not getting enough of what we call the EPA and the DHA, and that's really important, especially as we're aging. So that's when I would say look at a fish oil supplement as well.
And to finish it off, what is your must-have beauty item or items for ageless beauty?
So I'm a big believer in keeping it simple. I think that most people do too much and they over-exfoliate, cause too much trauma to the skin, and then we've got to repair all the damage that we've done. I love oils for the skin. So I'm a big believer in maintaining barrier function of the skin, maintaining the microbiome of the skin. That's a whole other topic to talk about. But I love a cleansing oil and a cleansing oil, and then an actual topical oil, replenishing oil. For me, really get those two. And of course, an SPF in the day is very important as well. But if we're eating well, we've got the right nutrients, then we actually don't need to do too much to the skin.
It's been so good speaking to you. I really could speak to you forever, and I think we will definitely have to invite you back. Thank you so much, Fiona. I love the way that you approach well-being. I've always loved your approach to remaining ageless, and I would absolutely encourage everyone to follow Fiona on her social channels, because she shares great tips, great recipes, and great science. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, Baha. Thank you. And I've also got the podcast as well, the Forensic Nutritionist podcast. So
I'll link to that as well. I will absolutely link to that.
For those that love the nitty-gritty information, there's more of it on there as well.
It was wonderful to speak to you. I can't wait to see you again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please share and rate this episode. I'd love that.